Sometimes a single weekend can tell you more about a country than a whole decade. We're about to dive into a few completely chaotic days where a nation's attention was just getting pulled in a million different directions at once. So what happens when that kind of whiplash hits? Well, let's try to make sense of it.
Okay, our story starts way, way up there, about 250 miles above the Earth. The weekend kicks off with something you almost never hear about, a medical evacuation from the International Space Station. A 5-month mission gets cut short for an astronaut with an undisclosed medical concern. Suddenly, the silence of space gets pretty loud.
So, while that very human drama is unfolding in orbit, let's come crashing back down to Earth, because at the exact same time, a totally different kind of storm is brewing. The White House drops a bombshell threatening huge tariffs on 8 of its closest NATO allies. You can just feel the ground shifting under everyone's feet.
And if that wasn't enough whiplash for you, the weekend wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. This time, we're talking about the pure, raw heartbreak of professional sports. The Buffalo Bills suffer this absolutely crushing overtime loss in the playoffs, and boom, before they've even processed it, their head coach is fired. I mean, from space to geopolitics to the stadium, what a roller coaster.
So you've got astronauts in trouble, international tariffs, and a devastating football game. What in the world do these things have in common? On the surface, absolutely nothing, right? But if you look closer, they paint this picture of a country being yanked in completely different directions all at the same time. Our job here is to try and find the signal in all that noise. Okay, so let's start by taking that 30,000-foot view. We're talking about the big picture here, the world of major government decisions, huge international power plays, the kinds of laws and threats that can literally change the lives of millions. First on the docket is this enormous piece of legislation, which got the nickname the One Big Beautiful Act. And what it does is, it takes a lot of those tax cuts from back in 2017, the ones that were just about to run out, and it makes them permanent. This is textbook, calculated, long-term economic policy in action. So let's get into the nitty-gritty for a second. What does this actually mean for people? Well, the standard deduction goes up, which is a tax break for a lot of folks. The cap on SALT deductions gets a big bump, which really helps people in high-tax states. The child tax credit gets a little bigger too. But on the other side of the coin, that tax credit you could get for buying a clean vehicle? Gone. It's a classic case of policy. For every change, there are winners and there are losers. Okay, now hold on to that thought of careful, structured lawmaking and contrast it with this. On Saturday, out of the blue, President Trump posts this threat online. And the whiplash is just incredible. You go from methodical legislation to this sudden, impulsive demand. The message is clear. If you don't sell us Greenland, there are going to be serious economic consequences. And make no mistake, the stakes here were incredibly high. These weren't adversaries being targeted. These were our core NATO allies, the UK, France, and Germany. The threat was huge. A 10% tariff on everything they sell us, which would quickly jump to 25%. All of this to try and force Denmark to sell Greenland. The official reason given was that these allies weren't paying their fair share for American protection. All right, let's pull the camera way back in now. We're going to zoom out from that huge scale of geopolitics and focus right down on the human level. Because while all the headlines were screaming about taxes and tariffs, these incredibly personal, high-pressure stories were playing out, mostly under the radar.
Remember the astronauts we mentioned at the start? Well, this timeline just shows you how fast everything went down. On January 8th, a spacewalk gets called off out of nowhere. A few days later, on the 14th, the whole crew undocks from the station to come home early. The very next day, they splash down and are rushed to a hospital. NASA was careful not to call it an emergency, but let's be real. This was a serious medical evacuation from orbit.
And in the middle of all this mystery, you have NASA's response, which was just a masterclass in calm professionalism. You see this quote from the administrator, and it's all about readiness, training, and safety. It's a powerful reminder of just how much planning goes into these high-risk missions. And boy, what a contrast to the kind of political chaos that was happening back down on Earth.
All right, let's switch gears to another kind of pressure cooker, the NFL playoffs. The Bills versus the Broncos. And if you just look at the stats, the Bills actually gained more yards, but the killer? The turnovers. 5 for Buffalo, only 1 for Denver. When you lose a game 33-30 in overtime, you know it came down to a few tiny, heartbreaking moments. That's exactly what happened here.
And the fallout was just immediate. This headline comes out right after the game, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, within hours, The team's head coach, Sean McDermott, is fired, just like that. A career, a season, an entire city's hopes, all turned upside down in one single afternoon.
So think about this. We've got these two tracks running at the same time, right? On one track, you have the big, sweeping actions of the government. On the other, these super intense personal stories of individuals. And on Monday, which just happened to be Martin Luther King Jr. Day, these two tracks didn't just run side by side anymore. They slammed right into each other.
So let's look at the official government side of things first. The administration rolled out a series of actions that, to many observers, looked like a step back from what the day is all about. Federal DEI offices were shut down by executive order. MLK Day was taken off the list of days you could get into national parks for free. Some government agencies even put their internal celebrations on hold. And the official presidential proclamation? It didn't come out until late that night.
But at the exact same time all of that was happening, something else was going on. A massive, powerful cultural statement was being made. The NBA, the entire league, dedicated its whole day to honoring Dr. King. We're talking wall-to-wall basketball, 9 games running from the afternoon clear through the night, all framed as this huge celebration of unity and justice.
I mean, you just can't miss the contrast here. It's night and day. On one hand, you have official government moves that critics were calling a rollback. And on the other, you have this giant cultural engine, professional sports, going all in, celebrating loud and proud. It really felt like two completely different countries were observing the exact same holiday.
So here we are. After this weekend of pure whiplash, you have to ask, how do we make any sense of this? How do you possibly connect the dots between astronauts, tax policy, a football game, and a national holiday? Where is the signal in all of this noise?
Well, maybe it breaks down like this. You start with that view from above, the big, abstract world of policy and power plays. Then you have the view from the ground, these really relatable human stories about pressure and risk. And then finally, you have the collision, that moment on MLK Day where the massive gap between official policy and cultural expression just became too big to ignore.
And that leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? A question about what really defines a country at any given moment. When history looks back on a weekend as chaotic as this one, which story is it going to tell? Is the real story the one about power and politics, or is it the one about human drama, resilience, and culture? That's something to think about.